Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week by week basis. And today's topic of discussion is mental wellness. On the conversation on mental wellness, I want to talk a little bit about creating clarity out of complexity. And I think life can be very simple. Like, if you want to live a simple life, great, fine. But I think that if you're pursuing great things, if you're trying to accomplish something that you've never done or that hasn't been done, or if you're trying to push towards goals that are stretch goals, not readily accessible to you, then it involves a lot of complexity and involves a lot of moving parts, especially when we start thinking about goals that stretch across an extended period of time. Like, those goals are typically complicated in that there's a lot of moving parts. So even if you can envision a reality where it will translate as success, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's straightforward or simple to get there. And so that's where we need clarity. And I think clarity is such an effective tool to give ourselves a sense of direction when we're pushing towards something that we want, and know that you have to know like what you want. Because if you're just moving for the sake of moving without clarity, then you've kind of lost your sense of direction. And so for me, clarity is really a sense of direction. And it's a sense of direction that I seek out when I think about like the things that I want in life and how do I want to attain them. I have to get clear by way of like what things that I'm okay with doing to attain those specific goals. I had to get clear around what things should I be doing to be able to attain those goals. Like, what is it that I need to work on? What do I need to work less on? Like, all of those things are questions where the answers aren't necessarily readily available, right? It's not necessarily intuition that's going to get you there. And so for me, a lot of my journey has been really much anchored on finding clarity where it becomes ambiguous. And so when I think about complexity is it's like a black box, right? When we think about black box, it's like it's hard to pull out the pieces that make up the whole. And so when you're charting your own path, it's complex because you're not really quite sure if the tool you're using is the right tool, if the choice you're making is the right choice, if where you're spending your energy is the best place to put your energy. And so sometimes it's worthwhile to take a step back and to get clear. And so I've seen this done in professional settings. I've seen this done with people who have attain success in all different shapes and forms. But clarity, I think, is something that we all have to figure out our own way to get there. And it's always worth the time spent. And so typically when it is a case that you're looking for clarity, if you find yourself in a position where you're not really quite sure what the next step forward is, I think a lot of people go by the adage, if you don't know what to do, do nothing. And I actually don't believe that. I think that if you don't know what you do, get yourself in a position where you get better clarity, right? If you don't know what you do, it's the moment to put your energy towards getting clarity to be able to make the appropriate next step. And so that can be a lot of different things. And so a lot of the times what people do to get clear is they break away from routine. So I think sometimes it's the rut of the routine that can really make the going tough, right? It's just like feeling like you're in a rut, feeling like you're doing the same thing over and over again and not getting the results that you're looking for. And that can be really discouraging, right? And so pushing towards long-term goals. And so for me, I've pushed towards a few long-term goals of my own. And sometimes like just looking at the numbers, like putting in the energy, not seeing the results, it's hard to justify consistency. It's hard to justify discipline. It's hard to justify feeling motivated when it's been years in the making. You're still not necessarily getting the result that you're looking for. But then when I feel those things, because I still know that it's worth the energy invested, then it means I need to get clear. It means that the thoughts that I'm entertaining are a reflection of the fact that I'm dealing with a lot of complexity. I really don't know what bucket I need to be putting my energy in. And it's the opportunity for me to unpack the complexity inherent in the pursuit and then find myself to a point of clarity. And that point of clarity doesn't mean I know the full picture, but it means I have a sense as to like the next few steps ahead. And so complexity can be a byproduct of the emotional landscape that we're in. Complexity can be a byproduct of the geopolitical situation that we're in, the socioeconomic status that we have. All of these can bring about their own layers of complexity. It can be life changes or like life transitions that create complexity as well. But all that you need is clarity on the next few steps. And so stepping away, breaking away from routine is so important. And sometimes it's impossible to do that. So maybe it's just a little thing that you do that is out of the ordinary, that is enough to give you the clarity that you need to keep pushing forward. And I think that sometimes we think that's like it's big leaps and strides, but even little things that we do to focus on self-care, focus on alignment, focus on feeling centered and feeling grounded are so important to keep ourselves pushing forward. And it doesn't mean you're pushing forward perfectly. And so for me, like I had a pretty strong track record my first 3-4 years, and then things started getting spotty, but not necessarily because I lacked clarity, but because I was attaining some of my goals in different buckets of my life, but I didn't know necessarily how that was going to fit into the whole. And so that's not necessarily going to be something that you know right out of the gate. You need to get clear about how are you going to position yourself so that you can carry the things that you're pushing towards carrying, so on and so forth. So I think that stepping out of routine is such a big one. I think another way to get clear also is in engaging and discussing with people who are going through similar experiences. And I think that it doesn't necessarily need to be like a one-on-one conversation. It can be like motivational speeches can give a lot of clarity. They can help you break out of a rut, break out of a thinking pattern that is not helpful to you or to the situation. I think that I rely a lot on just motivational messaging when it is the case that I'm starting to feel a little bit like, okay, like I'm putting a lot of my energy into very specific buckets and I just don't see the return on the investment here. Then maybe it's about also getting clear about like what education do I need so that I'm not just putting energy into a bucket and it's not giving me a return, but I'm doing it intelligently. And sometimes to do something intelligently, you just need to know a little bit more about the trade that you're practicing or the thing that you're putting your energy into. And I think that gives a lot of clarity as well. I think that clarity can also be about like who are you bringing along your journey, right? Sometimes what makes the road arduous are the relationships that you have, right? And it's not necessarily the case, but it can be the case for some people. And clarity means, well, you know, what boundaries do I need to establish or what people do I need to spend less time with? I think sometimes we know what it is that we need to do and we do our best to avoid making those steps forward. But when we have that clarity, when we know like at this stage in the game is a fork in the road and like this is the right move forward and this isn't, then it's really honoring ourselves to act from that place of clarity, right? To honor that clarity by making it something that we can convert into action. And so I think that clarity gives a lot of energy. I think clarity gives a lot of light. And I find that myself, when it is a case that I find like I'm low energy, I don't have as much motivation as I typically would. I am not feeling necessarily the desire to stay consistent. If I'm dealing with these emotions that are creating complexity in execution, and sometimes it is your emotions that represents the battlefield that you're kind of up against. But if it is the case that I'm doing that, then I need to give myself the opportunity to get clear around like what actually is impeding my ability to push forward, like what actually is keeping me from executing the way that I know that I need to. And if it is the case that I need to hold space for certain emotions like disappointment or hold space for specific emotions like frustration, because I think these are things like if you keep swallowing them and you don't hold space for them, they can really impede your ability to move forward. But if you're not focusing on the clarity on like what is the root issue here that's keeping me feeling like I'm stuck or feeling like I'm in a rut, if you don't address the root issue, then it's hard to get clear and how to push forward beyond it. So I think that honesty is so important. And I don't know if we really think about like how being honest with ourselves is just so important. Like we're not in the right headspace for execution. And it's really about like, how do I get myself in the headspace for execution? Because I know that this is what I want. I know this is how I want to move forward. So how do I unpack the emotional complexity that is my current experience, but I can execute and I can push forward. So I think that a lot of what I do when it is the case and I'm pushing towards anything or pushing out of something, like if I'm dealing with conflict, when I'm dealing with goals, when I'm dealing with decision making, especially I work in project management, my only tool that I really am using is how do I get clear on the risks? How do I get clear on the steps? How do I get clear on the tools, on the resources, on how I need to manage and organize myself to navigate this terrain where I'm maximizing my probability of success? I think all of it really does play on clarity. And I think clarity can be something that we gain by focusing on the data. We can get clarity by focusing on the historical. We can get clarity by focusing on past trials and error, like past mistakes. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can get clear. It's not always going to be the same cookie cutter framework or template, but I think that if we are giving ourselves the opportunity to just get clear, then we're going to get that clarity that we need. And with that clarity, the energy, the motivation to continue to push forward. And I think that I've tried to focus a lot the last few of my videos on more the VUCA framework. So I've tried to talk a little bit about having vision when it is the case that you're dealing with volatility and creating a sense of understanding when you're dealing with uncertainty. And so today I want to talk a little bit about like, what do you do when you're dealing with complexity? And life is complex. It's not straightforward. And you can have a picture perfect plan of your life that is straightforward, that involves like a few steps of your own that will guarantee you a few outcomes. But the universe doesn't work that way. It doesn't, you making the right steps doesn't guarantee the outcomes that you want. And that can be a difficult path to navigate, right? When you're charting your own path. There's a lot of complexity involved, not just in the world around you and trying to figure out like, what do I need to do now to get the outcome that I'm looking for, but the world that it creates within you as well. And I think that we often understate the, I guess, rise and fall of the different emotions that we're experiencing when we're pushing towards things. When complexity starts to feel overwhelming, and complexity can feel overwhelming, complexity can feel daunting. But again, like rather than like succumb to those feelings, focus on clarity. If that means stepping away from your routine, do that. If that means giving yourself a mental break, do that. If that means exercising, do something good for your body, do that. If that means resting, and sometimes resting is the most understated, high impact return on your value thing that you could possibly do, then rest. Do what it is that you need to do to continue to feel good, to continue to feel motivated to push towards the things that you want, or even to get the clarity to push towards the things that you want. And so I wanted to come on here and talk a little bit about that, because I think that clarity is something that we can gain through so many different mediums. I think there can be spiritual clarity that you can gain through meditation, through reflection, through journaling. You can get clarity through exercise, through rest, through the ways that you eat. You can get clarity in the conversations that you're having and asking yourself like the really uncomfortable questions and like being upfront and honest with yourself about like what those answers are. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can get clarity, but really we need to prioritize clarity. We need to value clarity as well. I think sometimes we want to hide behind facades and hide behind pretense, but it never helps us. It just kind of extends the inevitable, essentially. So I wanted to come on here and talk a little bit about the value of clarity and how it's benefited me in my life. I think that I'm still pushing towards the things that I want, because in the moments where I feel overwhelmed by complexity, my focus is on getting clear. I really do value clarity as a tool, as a life skill for sure. Attaining clarity is a life skill for sure. And even I see in professional settings, like when we have like a lot of companies organize offsites where there's a lot of ideating, a lot of brainstorming about strategy or vision. And that's how you get clear, right? You give people the opportunity to really create synergy, to really come together, to collaborate, to think about, well, how do we create this version of reality? And sometimes if you're working on something on your own, like you need to give yourself that little powwow, right? Like how do you create the version of reality that you know is going to give you the sense of alignment, fulfillment, and meaning that you have been pushing towards? And if that's what you've been pushing towards, like don't give up halfway through. Keep focusing on the outcomes that you want and figuring out like the tools and the resources that you need to attain to get there. And all of it is part of your becoming, right? Like all of the pivots, all of the trials and errors, and all of the iterations that you're doing, it's building into your story. It's building into your history. And at some point, it's going to be a success story if you don't give up. So I just wanted to come on here and talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about the benefit, the power of clarity. I think it is such a significant lever, especially for our mental wellness. Like when we're feeling overwhelmed, it's a lot of feeling overwhelmed means like there's a lot of complexity here that I haven't unpacked, and I'm really not quite sure what to do. And like not knowing what to do is totally human. It's totally part of the experience. If we all knew what we were doing all the time, then we wouldn't be struggling through anything at any point in time. So life is the journey for sure. But clarity is the key that gives you the things that you need to keep pushing forward. Now, if clarity is something that is important to you, if you want to focus on self-mastery, on that finding that inner alignment, then I do encourage you to check out our website. We do have programs for adults that focus on building that sense of value around development, focus, growth, clarity, how you get clear, how you live a life in alignment with your values and with the things that you want out of your life so that you live a meaningful and fulfilling life. We also do provide parent-child workshops focusing on cultivating leadership competencies in children. These workshops are built on the premise that leadership quotient is cultivated on 4 core competencies. And that's focusing on autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept. Something for everyone in your family. So definitely be sure to check out our website, subscribe to our website. We do also provide and circulate newsletters for different promotions and events that we host every now and again. And we do have our online courses giving you the opportunity to benefit from a virtual continuous learning environment, learning with like-minded people all over the world in a digital setting at your own pace. So thank you so much. Those are some things for you to check out. If you're still here, follow us, leave us a like. Every engagement really does help. It does encourage, it does support, and it helps grow the platform so that we can share the message with more people. And that's obviously the objective that we want. So thank you so much again, and I look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.